Okay, Josh, we're ready to go when you are. How do I know if he's on? Okay. All right, I think we're on. Welcome, everyone, to the November 15, 2022 Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District Board meeting. And the first agenda item that we have is to call a meeting to order and a pledge of allegiance. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome, everyone. And the first item is to see if there's any public comment. Anybody here that wishes to speak on an item that's probably not on our agenda? And I'm not seeing anybody coming to the podium, so we're going to move on to the next item, which is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion? Any corrections or additions? Any changes from staff on the agenda? None?
So moved.
Motion by Frank to approve. Any second? Anybody? Second by Matt. Okay, all in favor of the approval of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carried unanimously, 5-0. Okay, so right now we're going to go to our old and new business, and the first item will be our project or programs and project update by staff.
Hello, welcome. Our first topic will be lake levels. As of 11/14, Prior Lake is at 898.39, a decrease in 0.27 feet since last board meeting. Spring Lake at 909.01, a decrease of 0.13 feet. Pike Lake has been pulled, and that level logger has been out of the water due to low water levels. So the lakes continue to, their levels continue to decline, but we expect that to stabilize as winter here is approaching. So this fall, we've installed 11 of 14 new radio tags in Upper Prior Lake and Spring Lake as part of our carp management program. We'll use these new tags, which last around 2 years, combined with ones installed in 2021, to track aggregations and help aid commercial seining this winter or fall yet. So we've gotten notification from our local commercial netters that they are excited, which is good news. Since this last winter was unsuccessful at completing seining in Spring Lake, which we are really going to be driving additional to conduct additional events there this winter. This early winter might have, caught our chances of a fall open water seine, but we're still out there tracking. We'll likely be using the district boat, tracking carp up until we're going to be crunching ice. So it might be soon. In the monitoring and research program, we are continuing to import our historical data sets into our whiskey database. We're creating scripts to help automate this entry process for future data imports, which is going to be a big value to our time management with this new program. And we, the staff here, have joined the Minnesota Whiskey User Group, MINWUG, and so we're going to be attending a meeting, and I can see Frank enjoys that acronym. So just excited to have a support group to help aid our abilities to utilize this database to its maximum and provide our data in more useful ways. In late October, our Spring Lake residents got out and stenciled 56 storm drains, which is excellent, and providing awareness to clean drains. And we're excited to have such a good support group. And we have a stenciling kit here available for any other groups or individuals that want to continue stenciling and bringing awareness to our storm drains. So this brings us to our project's status update.
First, I'd like to share our cost share project. So this is a project recently completed by our partners, Scott Soil and Water Conservation District. So this is a project where they worked with the property owner to convert some cropped lands into native prairie that for the purpose of reducing runoff and to provide pollinator habitat. The project area was 4.3 acres in size. The watershed district contributed about $5,400 to this project. And for the results of that investment, the Soil and Water Conservation District is projecting that the site now will have saved 16.8 tons of erosion a year, reduce sediment by 1.4 tons per year, reducing phosphorus by 2.79 pounds per year, and reducing runoff from the site by 2 acre-feet. So what that means for district investment into this project, primarily, so the project is expected to have a 10-year life. So based over those 10 years, our investment is a little less than $200 in dollars per pound of phosphorus that is being removed. So that is on the lower end of our expenditures and is a good value for the investment into this project. Then in terms of all of our projects, we have now successfully negotiated a contract with a real estate specialist who will help facilitate discussions with some of our upper watershed property owners. That contract is in the board consent agenda packet for this evening. In terms of the Sutton Lake Iron Enhanced Sand Filter project, the next step for staff is really to start to assess an alternate location for the iron enhanced sand filter in response to some property owner discussions that we've had. So we hope to get that assessment starting here in the next couple of months. For the Spring West Iron Enhanced Sand Filter site, staff will continue to have discussions with Scott County staff regarding to better understand where the county's timing in terms of doing a corridor preservation and roadway alignment planning associated to this site, because the width of the corridor, the alignment of that roadway could have impacts on where we put the iron enhanced sand filter. So we really need to kind of have an understanding of where the county might be going with their roadway project, because we could, depending on where they go, we might have to take some of our potential locations off the table for where the iron enhanced sand filter could go. In addition, it's time to start to reinitiate some landowner discussions associated with that project. For the Buck Wetland Enhancement Project, we had a property owner meeting on November 1st. The project entails basically kind of two wetlands. There's the wet wetland and the east wetland. And we had 4 of 10 property owners or landowners associated with the wetland at the meeting, and 2 of 6 property owners adjacent to the east wetland at that meeting. So we presented and received feedback from the landowners on 4 draft project scenarios for that project. Those scenarios ranged from doing wetland enhancements to another project that could have more water quality enhancement to it, another project that could have flood control implications or benefits, and a large hybrid. And basically, the feedback that we received was that general feedback that there might be some support for a project that goes to wetland enhancements or water quality benefits. There was not a lot of appetite for a project that really did flood storage on that wetland. So our next step is to do a little additional landowner outreach, and also then to prepare the draft feasibility study that we will then bring forward to the managers. On the Sutton Lake Management Plan, a draft of the plan was just prepared and brought forward to the managers and the DNR for review and comment. We will have a meeting with landowners around Sutton Lake tomorrow evening, November 16th, where we'll be presenting basically the contents of that the lake management plan, and receiving their feedback. And then based on the feedback that we receive from the managers, the DNR, and the landowners, we will prepare the final report and submit it to the managers for approval in the next couple of months. Two other projects from the upper watershed, the Buck Channel chemical and the Ditch 13 chemical, at this point, based on our budgeting, really are not proposed to move forward until 2024. So then we also have two projects that we're going to be advancing using funding that we are expected to receive from Bowser, the watershed-based implementation funding. And so one of the projects will be the Swamp Lake Iron Enhanced Sand Filter. So we did receive approval from our conveners within our planning area to go ahead with the Swamp Lake study. And so at this point, for both the Swamp Lake and the Fish Lake studies that will be funded through this, we are in the process of developing a draft work plan and associated budget for each of these studies. We will be meeting with Spring Lake Township to review the draft work plan and budget with them this Friday to make sure that they that the study is meeting their needs as well. Once we receive their feedback, we will then refine as needed our budgets and our work plans, and then the plan is to submit the budgets to Bowser for approval in December and the work plans to Bowser in January. And then finally, we are starting to investigate potential flood detention projects within the watershed district. Staff has put together a draft list of potential projects and some associated evaluation criteria to help us try to narrow down to several projects that would move forward to feasibility studies in 2023. We reviewed the draft list of projects and criteria with the CAC, and then also with the managers as part of the workshop. We received some feedback from both the CAC and the managers, and now next step will be to try to develop some recommendations for narrowing down that list of projects to help with determining which ones will move forward for feasibility.
And the PLOC bank stabilization project is substantially completed with the installation of the trees and shrub plantings in segment 4. The project came in within budget, and so far we're happy to see that. Any questions on the projects or programs update?
Any questions? Christian?
Yes, for the Swamp Lake Iron Enhanced Sand Filter, I would suggest, just like you work with Spring Lake Township on planning out the feasibility study for Fish Lake, it may be worthwhile meeting with the Sand Creek Township Board and their engineer, which is the same engineer, and just in the beginning, in beginning of the feasibility study, involve them right away because they know the people, and so that was one suggestion.
Thank you.
And on the Spring Lake West iron in hand sand filter, I just noticed that the house that's located on the lot that is one of the proposed sites for an iron in hand sand filter was just removed. So it looks like they're getting ready to, who knows, maybe sell the land. And again, if it's possible to be involved in that and work with a potential developer up front, and maybe thereby get a location for the iron and hand sand filter early on, that would be an idea.
Joni, do you have something to say about that?
So thank you for these comments, Manager Markenberg. We will definitely reach out to Sand Creek Township to get their feedback on that. I guess I would like to follow up with you and learn a little bit more about exactly where that house is that has been removed, so that we understand where that property actually is located, because it could possibly be the property that Scott County owns.
Yes, I think it is, because they had a contract to remove the house on that 2.3 acre site that they own. So the county moved the house out. And they are not intending on selling the lot. They want to use that for a future road project, but we might be able to get some excess right away, if there is any, for a land swap for our Spring Lake West project. That's what we've been working on with the county. So I'm pretty sure the house that's been removed was the lot the county owns. I had one question on the Swamp Lake iron enhanced sand filter. Can that project feasibility study, or will there be a feasibility? Are we going to look at a control structure on the lake too? Is that going to be part of that project or not?
Yes, the control structure will be part of that project. That control structure not only could hold back possibly some water into the lake, but it also would benefit the iron enhanced sand filter, because it would do a slower release of the water so that we could capture and treat more of the water as it leaves the lake. So it's envisioned to also to be a water quality component to the project.
Very good, very good. Any other questions for staff on? All right, good job. We want to move ahead here to item 4.2, which is an ILID 2022 annual report. And we have our environmental century protection representative here to do the presentation.
Good evening, President, board members, administrator, staff. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to present in person. Wasn't here in person last year, but wanted to review how the project went this year. So we'll move pretty quickly through this as soon as it comes up.
Sorry, we're just having a loading issue for a second here.
We did get the report and the PowerPoint finalized just yesterday. That's why it's not in your board packet. So perhaps we could do a follow-up with a email transmission of the PDF. Isn't technology great? Well, I know I saw it before. There it is. Excellent. Thank you. My name again, Eric Lindberg, and wanted to review the second year of the implementation of the ILIDs, look at the statistics and some of the behaviors that we noticed and recommendations. Again, this is a system that's at the Spring Lake boat launch, and it provides coverage when inspectors are there and when they're not there, which is the greater amount of the time, operating roughly 5 in the morning until 11 p.m. at night. We have a magnetic sensor on that that's tripped when there's a vehicle within 20 feet of it. And then we look for motion and capture the videos and play a series of audio messages. So it's solar powered. I don't think there was any shortage on the power that we had there. The goal is to have people be aware when they come to the boat launch that they are responsible to remove any aquatic plants and inspect their boat and trailer. The videos are transmitted automatically up to our remote website, and this year we did most of the review of all the videos that were captured. So let's look at statistics here. As you would guess, it peaks around midday with activity dropping off, and this is averaging all of the activity at the boat launch, all 11,787 videos that were captured. There was north of 600 launches that were occurring between 5 and 8 a.m. in the morning. You can see the peak periods, of course, were June and July, and a lot of the activity in September, October, of course, were boats being pulled out for the fall. And it's a predictable graph as far as when the day of the week the peak periods are. And then you can see it, the breakdown here by hour on the left side and day of the week on the top. One of the interesting points from this is that there was approximately 9,000 videos captured during the schedule when the audio was scheduled to be played. So if you multiply out the number of audio messages, and Sean, I think we're at 3 messages per trip, so we had roughly 27,000 audio educational impressions on boaters at the launch, reminding them to do the right thing. I compared 2022 activity with 2021. We ran it for a similar amount of time. And then there were inspector hours from the DNR and waterfront restoration. We ran it, again, 5 to 11. And there were 11,791 videos captured. We were able to look at close to that amount and counted 2,000 launches. So percentage of launches is still pretty high. So when you consider there's a trip for a boat backing in, empty trailer pulling out, empty trailer backing up, boat pulling out, having around 20% is a good statistic. We had 5 suspect EAS violations, and boaters are coming from Alabama, a lot of different states, Louisiana. We provided these to staff. And I have some videos that we'll show here with these violations, but there were a number of objectives that we had from last year that we wanted to implement to improve the project in year 2. We were given permission to put in a concrete pier, and that dramatically cut out any false positives from the wind hitting the sign and moving it in the loose soil. We reduced the delay between the videos to 1 second, so a boat would pull up and would back up, and we would get that second video as well, and that was one of the things that we were focused on accomplishing this year. We reviewed almost twice as many videos as we did in 2021, and there's a couple of opportunities, 3 opportunities for improving the project in next year. So of note, in fact, maybe I should look at some of those. One of the things that we recommended is perhaps leveraging a positive reinforcement. If people are seen inspecting their boat and trailer, give them some type of a gift certificate to, rather than just try and chase down a citation from enforcement, because I think the word may travel faster if people are getting recognized for doing the right thing. We've seen that in other locations. So false positives were greatly reduced. We didn't see as much startling reaction to the audio messaging this year. I think it's normal that that doesn't elicit in second year a startling reaction because people become used to it. But we saw more boats from out of state, Alabama, Indiana, Louisiana, Tennessee. And then we had some plantings in front of the eyelids too, but I think we took care of those before they grew too tall. Yeah, so now what, Shauna? She's on it, thank you. All right, so here's an example of the first boat that pulls up. And we've got that video, and we also captured him backing up at the same time. So last year that might not have occurred as readily, so that was an adjustment we were able to make to settings on the camera. We see people inspecting and taking plants off before they launch their boat, and personal watercraft are always challenging to try and get the registration number off of. But the angle was great, and we appreciated the staff Shauna setting everything up there. There's a thumbs up from a visitor. We saw quite a few boats that had expired registration. Here's one from 21. And people still heard the audio message and read the sign on the pole. Should go to the next one here shortly.
Scrolling faster.
And I wouldn't recommend while the boat is backing up to try and clean things off the boat and trailer. You just don't know if the guy that's driving is seeing you back there. And again, people hear the audio message, it gets their attention, they read the sign, and that's really what we're trying to get them to do, is just be informed about what they need to do. Here's a commercial company that comes in with what we thought was a plant that should be investigated. It's an awful large rig. Here's another violation right on that back axle. You can see that. Here's a boater from Louisiana. Right when he gets further back, you can see a plant on the rear axle. Well, and in front of the spare trailer, or the spare tire on the trailer there too, and the tongue. We see the staff is active at the Spring Lake. I wonder what state he's from. But he had a plant on his axle. So I'm sure there's a lot of people that come up and do lake hopping. They go from one lake to the next looking for fish. Again, the audio message gets people's attention and they read the sign. Not the dog, just the person. I think that was another violation on that one there. We saw the sheriff there several times during the course of the year, but we see some of these plants that are growing up in front of it, and I'm not sure who plants them, but probably not the best spot to put the garden. We did see a lot of really good inspections from inspectors that were out there. We're not sure which, if they're from the DNR or waterfront restoration, but there we have an example of a gentleman looking under the boat and trailer. And even with that ragweed that collapses later on in the year, we can still see the boat going through there. People hear the message and they look under. So I think that's pretty much wrapping up. Again, these are a sample of the 11,000 videos that we captured. So the report
goes through highlights that our reviewer identified. I would open it up to any questions if we have time.
Any questions from anybody? I just had one comment. The video is really clear. It
is.
really look.
Yeah, Shauna does a great job in putting it in, pulling it out, getting it focused. She calls me if she needs any help remotely, so it works out great.
Any questions from the board? Any thoughts, comments?
Joni has one.
Joni?
Managers, I was just going to follow up and state that, so I'm going to ask that the CAC review this presentation once it's posted onto our website, and also to take a look at the final report. Then at their next meeting, ask that they provide some recommendations about how to move forward with the ILIDS project in 2023, so that they can bring forward their thoughts and recommendations to the board for board consideration as we decide how to move forward with ILIDS for 2023.
Okay, that sounds great. Sounds like a good plan.
Okay.
No other comment? Oh, Christian, you have a comment?
Yes, thank you for the presentation, Erik Lindberg. And thank you, Shauna, for working with it. And I look forward to also hearing the staff recommendation, like what was your analysis of the season and last season, and where would you like us to go? And one thing I agree with Mr. Lindberg is that if you work with, I think you can expand this project in the sense that you can do positive reinforcement. So there's all kinds of things that you can do to even enhance this project more. Overall, from what I saw down there, it seemed like there was a fairly positive reception from people that were at the launch. I think it's very important to work with the staffed inspection at the launch, and I thought our staffed inspection at the launch was very good too. I thought they did a very good job and was received well. And all of it is extremely important. And since we started this project, there's been 2 invasive species detected at Spring Lake, which is milfoil and zebra mussels. And probably these originated before this project started. But it's important to remember that there are many other invasive species that are still out there that are bad. So I think we still need to work on it. So I look forward to hearing what the assessment is. And I wonder if we could just get a very quick summary of what the expense was for the project this year.
I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but I know last year we had expenses for the actual device, and then there's also all the connecting pieces with video connection and things like that. So we're mostly this year paying for the maintenance of maintaining those connections.
Yeah, so it was significantly less expensive this year. And Mr. Lindberg, do you remember, is it 2,000 or 5,000 total?
Well, I think this year we had approximately $4,500 in expenses, but part of that was doing the concrete footing installation. So we came out and helped with that, so that part wouldn't be repeated in another year. So I forget how much that aspect was, but it would probably be less than $4,000 to operate it.
Yeah, so in my opinion, it seems like it's a fairly inexpensive approach to trying to reduce aquatic invasive species, but we'll have to analyze it. And the question is, do we want to continue it next year at Spring Lake? And the other question is, do we want to consider expanding it to Prior Lake? Thank you.
Okay. I was just kind of, it's interesting that some people, when they turn and listen to the audio, do you ever get any audio back? Or we don't record audio back, do we?
No, we're not allowed to under our permit with the DNR, but with the way that the housing is sealed, I'm not sure we could pick up any audio.
Okay, that's true.
Yeah.
Might not want to hear what they say sometimes. All right. Any other comments or questions from anybody? Otherwise, Mr. Lindberg, thank you for another
Thanks for your
good
time.
year presentation.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank
Okay, we're going to move on to 4.3, which is a permit 2202, which is in the Spring Lake Regional Park improvements. And Joni, I think you have this one.
President Loney and managers, right? So we did receive a permit application from Scott County Parks, who are in the process of developing the southernmost portion of Spring Lake Regional Park. So the project, the defined project and the permit application only relate to the portion of the park that is south of Shoreline Boulevard, directly adjacent to Spring Lake. District staff has been in consultation with Scott County Parks and their consultants probably for the last 10 months, sharing insights on our rules and working with them to develop this design so that it is in compliance with district rules. So the site is 13 and a half acres, and currently there is very little impervious on the site, about I believe only like 2/10 of an acre of impervious, which is just gravel roadway. Currently, the current drainage on the site, so the site drains to two wetlands, east and west wetlands, to an existing NERP pond that was constructed associated with, I believe, Shoreline Boulevard. And some of the runoff does drain back onto Shoreline Boulevard and is caught in the inlets, and then probably ends up back in that NERP pond, and a little bit of the runoff goes directly into Spring Lake. The proposed plan for the development of the park includes a fairly large parking lot, a pad for a future building. Our calculations assume that the building will be constructed, but is not yet going to be implemented as part of this project right now for them. The project includes some trails and a boardwalk along one of our wetlands on the very far left side of the graphic to minimize impacts to that wetland. Some picnic areas, a fishing pier, a kayak launch, and several overlooks of the lake. In total, the construction of this project will disturb 7.5 acres. Ultimately, there will be 2.4 acres of new impervious once construction is complete. In terms of district rules, so for the volume control and water quality, both of those requirements will be met by the installation of an infiltration basin that is located just west and south of the parking lot. Excuse me if I can use my pointer here for a minute. Sorry, if you can see where my mouse is, right here is a new infiltration basin that is being proposed as part of that project. Part of our staff's recommendation will be that as part of the permit, that once they're starting construction, that they pull a soil boring in this area and perform a soil analysis to ensure that that infiltration basin soils actually can infiltrate as we are planning. If that soil boring comes back that shows that infiltration will not happen as we expect, then they will need to design it so that that basin become a filtration basin and probably do some enlargement of it in order to be in compliance with district rules. Then in terms of the peak discharge rate control for the site, that is handled once again by this infiltration basin along with some overflow into the wetland. And then on top of that, some of the flow will be directed over to a NERP pond that is located on the parcel located directly west of the site. So the Scott County Parks has been in conversations with this property owner to be able to use this wetland, which has the capacity to be able to take some of this runoff from Spring Lake Park, and might haven't even been designed originally to be able to take some of that water to begin with. And then some of the other runoff will go into this other wetland, which is on the right side of your map, or I'll call it on the north side of the park. So once again, this design will meet the district's volume control, water quality, and peak discharge rate control requirements per district rules. In addition, the plan does show for areas, the disturbed areas, to be once again revegetated, predominantly with native plant species. The plan calls for erosion control blankets on slopes greater than 4 to 1, doing inlet protection on Shoreline Boulevard, installing silt fence and at times double silt fence to protect the lake, some floating silt curtain within the lake, and also a rock construction entrance. So once again, their erosion control plans do seem to be adequately addressing potential erosion that could occur with this project. One of the conditions of the permit also is the request that they provide us with their stormwater pollution prevention plan for the district's review before we sign off and issue the permit. So the complete permit application was received by the district on October 3rd. So by state statute, the district has 60 days to either approve or deny the permit, or to provide written notice to the applicant of an extension of the 60-day review period. So there are probably three options right now for action. The first would be to approve the application subject to the conditions noted in the permit application staff review comments, which were included in the packet, some of which of these conditions I noted as I was presenting the project. The board could choose the table item and extend the application if there is some aspect of the project that the board would want some additional discussion on or addressed as part of the applicant, or to deny the application and stating the reasons for the denial. So staff recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions noted in the staff review comments.
All right, thank you, Joni. Good report. Any comments? Mr. Boyles.
A comment and two questions. First of all, thanks for working in league with the park staff and City of Prior Lake staff and county's consultants to come to some consensus here. I presume there's a basic consensus. Number two, I see that we require a performance surety from the contractor. Do we waive the actual permit fee for a public entity? I simply can't remember.
Yes, we do waive the permit fee for any public entity, but we do ask, or we do require surety be provided by their contractor.
Gotcha. And then finally, future building, the four-season pavilion, is that incorporated in this permit, or do they have to come back to us at such time as they build that pavilion for a separate permit?
My understanding is that the building, the construction, well, currently the stormwater should, when that building is constructed, this current plan should be able to adequately address the stormwater runoff generated by that building, and probably the size of that building would not trigger them to need to come back and get an additional permit from us.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Christian?
Yes, I would be in favor of approving the project. And I just had a question. It seems like a very large parking lot. Is that necessary? I know it's not related, but it has to do with hard surface and so on. It just seems to me there's a lot of parking spaces there. But it's just a comment. I don't think that should stop the project. But,
Right, Manager Markenberg. It's really, I do trust that county staff really kind of understands what the demand will be for parking, especially on this really highly desirable parcel that's overlooking the lake. I mean, undoubtedly, right, we hate to see the removal of trees, but I do trust. They actually have, if you even see it, they've even put in provisions for additional overflow parking. They think that the parking demand will be probably even exceeding the parking lot. But with that said, I mean, the design itself does comply with our rules.
Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll be looking for a motion.
So moved. Approval.
Approve option number one.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. a motion's been made to approve option number 1, which is staff's recommendation. Second by Manager Markenberg. Any other further discussion on the motion? Any other discussion? Okay, I'm not seeing any or hearing any. So all in favor of the motion, say aye. 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 All opposed? Motion carried unanimously, 5-0. Okay, we are now on to the watershed management study that Joni has been heavily involved in with other managers of the other watersheds, and I think we're coming to a final report. Joni.
President Loney and managers. So yes, this was a joint study that was performed jointly between Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District, Scott WMO, and Scott Soil and Water Conservation District. The goal of the study was to explore the best governance structure to deliver water resource solutions more efficiently, more cost-effectively, and more collaboratively for the residents of Scott County. Ultimately, you know, the intent behind the study was to see if they could find some more cost efficiencies to once again deliver, you know, improved services for the residents of Scott County. As part of the study, there was a steering committee put together comprised of elected and appointed officials from each of the agencies, and Manager Boyles and Loney were representing Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District. There was a technical advisory team established, which really tried to provide a broad representation of stakeholders within the county. So we had a water resource engineer represented, a community development director, a township chair, along with a rural landowner. So that technical team first provided insight on draft deliverables. The team then took that feedback, refined our deliverables before bringing those deliverables to the steering committee. And then there was the project management team, once again, comprised of myself, Troy Kupel with Soil and Water, Vanessa Strong from Scott WMO, and Brad Davis from the county, who kept us moving along. And so there was a project charter established at the beginning of the process that really kind of identified several questions for the team to investigate throughout the course of the study. One of the things that they asked us to do was look at similar studies and find if there were some findings that would be applicable to the work that we were doing. Another component of our task was to really first just try to understand and define how we operate today. What do we do in terms of projects and programs? What are our funding sources? How do we collaborate? And then, probably most importantly, what are the options for improvement? Should we consider doing a government change, a government structural change, or should we be trying to find ways just to collaborate better? The study was put together as a 3-phase study. So the project initiation really was initially for a couple of months where we were establishing our committee members, putting together our charter and approving that. Then from August to November of 2021, we went into the discovery phase, and that's really where we were trying to understand how each one of our entities operates. What are our programs and projects? What are our priorities? What are our funding sources? And how do we currently collaborate together already? And then the final phase 2 was looking at improvement. And that's where we were looking at some potential options for governance structure change and some additional brainstorming in terms of how we could collaborate better. We did meet, once again, a number of times with our technical team, once again, who first vetted our projects, and then before we brought it forward to the steering committee. Once again, the structure of the design was kind of set up with decision points kind of at the end of each one of those phases, where the steering committee would make a determination whether we should continue on to the next phase or whether we should conclude the study at that point. So just briefly, some of the findings that we found in our first phase, which was the discovery phase, was that based on studies of other similar watershed studies, it was determined that that most of these projects, these studies, had been initiated due to economic conditions and budget constraints. That was really kind of the impetus to start those studies of doing governance change, and that it really required sustained political will to reduce or consolidate functioning watershed management units. It's much easier if those governmental entities or those units are non-functioning, but if they are determined to be high-functioning watershed districts, it takes a lot of political will to make that change. In addition, Bowser has a role to play in doing any sort of governance change. But a number of these studies did result in some additional informal collaboration and coordination from some of those water entities. You know, in comparison to that, this study really was not initiated due to any sort of stressors in terms of economics. It really was the entities coming together and asking the question, how can we collaborate better? How can we work better? And really just trying to find an opportunity to improve, once again, to make cost efficiencies and improve services for our citizenry. As we also did find that, you know, we are collaborating together already between the three entities. To a large extent, Soil and Water Conservation District is serving the Scott WMO and the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District. As you may be aware that, you know, Scott Soil and Water helps us with the cost share program, as well as helping us with our farmer-led council. And so also there isn't as much collaboration going on between Scott WMO and Prior Lake Spring Lake, but really that really only makes sense because we are both water management entities with our own distinct boundaries. We both have, we're providing comparable services, but we don't overlap, and so there really is no duplication of services. Next, please. And while the Scott WMO and Prior Lake Spring Lake do have similar programs and authorities and responsibilities, the amount of our programs, what we do for programs, and how we implement them do vary quite a bit. And that is really in response to the fact that we have different natural resource issues that we are trying to address. And we are also being responsive to the stakeholders within our districts. We found that from an administrative overhead standpoint, each one of the entities, their overheads were pretty much representative of the size of each organization. And once again, another finding that came out of this was that while Scott WMO and Prior Lake Spring Lake have the ability to levy, the Soil and Water Conservation District does not. They have a very unstable funding source, and they really do rely on much heavier on grant funds, and also to provide service agreements with other entities, with the other watershed entities. And finally, at the conclusion of the first phase, we did say, yes, there probably are opportunities for increased collaboration and efficiencies between our three organizations. So as we moved into phase 2, I think we can keep going. The group developed 8 different organizational structure options that we evaluated. 5 of these options would require the Board of Soil and Water Resources to approve before that structure or those changes could happen. 3 of them were more administrative options that we could do without needing to receive Bowser approval. Very quickly, some of the options that we looked at was that the first one was for staff of the Soil and Water Conservation District to become employees of the county, and that the county would also administer the Soil and Water Conservation District, which would mean kind of dissolving the Soil and Water Conservation Board. The second option was that Prior Lake Spring Lake would be merged into the Scott WMO along with and become county employees along with Soil and Water. Once again, all of them then being overseen by the county board. Third option was that just Prior Lake merge with the Scott Soil and Water, the Scott WMO, which would be disbanding Prior Lake Board. The fourth option was that that the Prior Lake, Spring Lake, and Scott WMO joined into a new sort of watershed entity, independent of the county, which would then have their own independent board. And then finally, an option was brought forward where the watershed district would actually would change into a WMO, and staff would become staff of Prior Lake. Let me qualify it. There are some suggestions that we would be with the city of Prior Lake. This was not vetted by the city, so just make that very clear that the city of Prior Lake had not even weighed into these options. From the administrative options, one of the options was that that the staff of Scott WMO and Prior Lake Spring Lake all become staff of the Soil and Water Conservation District. But then we would still, the board for the Scott County WMO and Prior Lake Spring Lake boards would still remain, but all staff would be housed in Soil and Water. The other option was that staff of Prior Lake would then become county staff. Once again, the Prior Lake Spring Lake board would still exist, but once again would be supported by county staff. And then lastly, the idea that the Prior Lake Spring Lake staff would become employees of the city of Prior Lake, and once again would then still support the Prior Lake Spring Lake board. So those were the 8 options that were developed that we brainstormed. We then evaluated each one of those options using 7 criterion. One was, did we see the opportunity for significant monetary savings through this option? How was the consistency of these actions with our existing plans and statutes? Did this make logic to the public? Would it improve the outcomes for our constituents? Would it improve our permitting processes? Would it improve the outcomes to the resources that we are trying to protect and preserve? And what is the perception of change to some of our historic relationships? So once we did that evaluation, really none of the options really showed any significant monetary savings or any major benefits. And so it was really deemed that the agencies as they are today are already operating efficiently and effectively. We did, though, also brainstorm some opportunities of how could we possibly collaborate better. And this is just a number of topics in terms of possibly sharing our resources better, possibly expanding our farmer-led council to be county-wide, improving and collaborating more on shared education and outreach, possibly doing some shared training of our elected and appointed officials, sharing GIS data, possibly developing a consortium of lake associations, trying to improve our permitting process, and a number of other sort of opportunities here. So the conclusions at the end of this phase really were that while there is significant collaboration that already exists, that there's still opportunities to improve our collaboration even better. Some of those opportunities that had received probably the most interest were improved streamlining of our permitting process, expanding the farmer-led council, expanding our partnerships in terms of education and outreach, holding regular watershed meetings between the watershed administrators and staff so that we really are truly communicating with each other and coordinating effectively, and possibly doing some elected and appointed official training. To order to do that, though, to do that successfully, staff needs the direction and support of their governing boards, and it also requires the commitment and accountability of staff to develop some solid recommendations and make progress in moving initiatives forward. So the steering committee's final recommendation was to maintain our current organizational structure, but then also to continue our mutual commitment to identify, initiate, and expand our collaboration opportunities. So in order for us to do that, we are currently thinking that utilizing scale would be our best mechanism for us to advance our continued investigation of improved collaboration, with the thought of possibly re-establishing a watershed committee or a water subcommittee to scale. And not only would our 3 organizations participate in that committee, but we would also invite water resource representatives from the cities and townships to participate in that committee, once again, to really think outside the box and figure out how all of our entities who are dealing with water can collaborate and much better. And so once again, the idea would be for that committee to be established. We are starting those discussions with scale to see if this is feasible. And once again, if this committee gets established, the idea would be that each of us entities would be reporting back at a minimum annually to our boards to once again be accountable to show what sort of programs we're thinking about and developing those programs for collaboration, further collaboration. So with that, staff is recommending that the Board of Managers vote to adopt this final report of the watershed management study, and then to direct staff to move forward with exploration of collaboration opportunities with Scott WMO and Scott Soil and Water Conservation District.
Okay, well, thank you, Joni. I had just 2 quick comments. One, I think it was a very professionally done report by yourself, Troy Kupel, Vanessa Strong, and Brad Davis. You were the main pins on getting this done on the technical side. Frank and I were just along for the ride, I think. And the other thing is, I noticed that you just started a month before we started this process, and I'm glad you hung in there for it, because we kind of sprung that in on you at the very beginning, and it was a lot of work. I think you would admit to that, so I appreciate that. So with that, I'm going to ask, anybody else have comments?
I see the motion here, and I would like to make the motion with one contingency. Is there any possibility that we can shrink that 1-year period down to a half a year, to 180 days? There's so many things going on that it's kind of easy to say, okay, that's done, and you focus on these other things, and sometimes you just don't get back, even though you intended to. So I'd like to amend this to receive a report in 180 rather than 365 days. Is that something the staff can do?
Manager Boyles, provided that we can get ourselves up and running in scale within that time frame, I mean, at a minimum, we can at least provide input on how we are moving forward with scale and how we are organizing ourselves and what sort of initiatives we are wanting to, investigate further. So, Manager Boyles, yes, we certainly can report back in 180 days.
I've got some ideas if I can help.
We're all ears.
Frank, was that a motion you made, though?
Yes, it was.
Okay, the motion was made by Frank to basically adopt the final report and direct staff to move forward. with the exploration of collaboration opportunity with Scott Water Management Organization and Scott Soil and Water Conservation, and report back within 180 days. Is there a second? Second by Matt. Okay, now with the motion and second, now could we have any other further discussion by anybody? Any other discussion? Christian?
Yeah, I will just applaud you for doing the study, and I very much encourage continued cooperation with the other organizations and learn from each other and work with each other. So I think it's a very good idea.
Yes, Manager Markenberg, I would say for me, the benefit of this whole study has been developing and strengthening the relationship with Scott WMO and Scott Soil and Water Conservation District. I think the relationship building between our three agencies was really, it benefited all of our agencies for staff to spend concerted time together and getting to know each other much, much better.
Okay, I just have one other quick question on Frank's 180 days. Is that from today or when the scale group approves the committee? Today? From today, okay, 180 days from today. Okay, with that clarification and not seeing anybody else wanting to make a comment, or I assume you're ready to vote. So all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried 5-0. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to the Treasurer's Report with Treasurer Christian Morkenberg.
Yes, our finances are on track and below budget. The general fund is at 75% of budget, and that's the most up-to-date due to its mainly administrative salaries and benefits, so those we know the expenses up to end of this October. The implementation fund, because it deals with water quality, water storage, flooding, and aquatic invasive species, we're getting billing from contractors that come in later, so therefore it's not as up to date, but currently all the implementation fund expenses are at 32%, so we are well below budget right now. We know at the end of the year we'll get some costly expenses that will come in, so we'll see where we end up. Eventually we have a projection for that. Of good news also is that most of our funds have now been transferred to the 4M Bank. We have maybe about 34,000 left at Old National and Sterling Bank, and we still have them there until we know that everything is up and running. We have successfully transferred payroll to where we use US Bank and 4M to process that, so that's a big thing, accomplishment. And we have sent in an application as an example for the levy payment in December to be submitted to 4M. So those are an example of some of the things we had to do when we changed our banks. Yes, I think that would be any questions?
Yeah, any questions? Any questions on the Treasurer's Report? Manager Boyles.
Just a question on the Old National Bank. Is that because checks are still floating around out there, haven't been processed? I'm just curious as to why we're having trouble extricating ourselves from Old National.
Manager Boyles, we had all of our ACH payments that were directly deposited into Old National, so any sort of grant funds or grant reimbursements that we would receive from the DNR or Bowser were automatically deposited into Old National, and I needed to do the paperwork to get those ACH payments now transferred over to US Bank, which I think we have done. I just need to get confirmation from one more entity just to make sure before I shut the bank down.
Thank you.
Yeah, sounds like we're close to that. We're getting close.
Very
Okay.
close.
Good question. Any other questions or comments on the Treasurer's Report? Looks good so far. Looks great, Christian. Good job. Okay, well, that takes us to the consent agenda, and it's considered as one item of business, consists of routine administrative items or items not requiring discussion Items can be removed from the consent agenda at the request of the board member, staff member, or a member of the audience. Please state which items or items you wish to remove for separate discussion. I would like to remove item 6.6, the Edina Realty contract. Is there any other items anybody wants to remove? Okay, not seeing any. So I guess you're okay, Frank?
I was going to say I move the consent agenda as amended.
Oh, okay, that's right, we have to do that. Go ahead, Frank.
I move the consent agenda as amended. Do I do better that time?
You did. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Ben. Okay, motion to approve the consent agenda as amended has been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Frank. I have never pulled an item off the agenda. That's why I was confused. Okay, so now we're going to be on item 6.6, the Edina Realty contract. I just have a couple quick questions and comments. One is Exhibit A. That'll be for every project we need real estate consultant services. There will be a separate Exhibit A or scope of service, Joni, and then does that have to come back to the board at all, Exhibit A?
President Loney, yeah, the intent is that, excuse me, yes, that for each individual project that we are going to have Edina Realty provide services for, that we would develop Exhibit A that would outline exactly what their scope of services would be and the associated fees. We certainly, excuse me, my intent would be to bring it forward to the board for approval.
Okay. That's why the only question, I didn't know if we needed to bring that back to the board or not. And the only other comment I would have is the termination clause is really to November 30th, 2023. That's only 1 year. I'm assuming we're going to need services longer than that. I would like to extend that period if the rest of the board is okay with that. Maybe 2 year, maybe 3 year. I mean, we can always terminate the agreement if it's not working. But instead of coming back again and approving it next year, I would 2 years or 3 years, I think. But that might, maybe even 3 years, if that's okay. So that would be my suggestion or motion. Can I make a motion as the chair? I don't know.
I think you might be able to entertain a motion.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the Edina Realty contract, unless there's any other discussions. Any other discussion, Matt?
I would prefer to see how it ran for a year
Okay.
rather than do it for 3. It's potato. You can run it for 3 and cancel it at 1, or you can run it for 1 and extend it.
Okay,
But
that's fine. And I think this is an experimental contract. We have never done this before. I just didn't want to have to come back, next year at this time, probably going to have to amend it. But if it's not working, we would just cancel it, terminate it. Okay. With that suggestion, I'm going to leave the contract as is. So I make a motion to approve the contract as submitted by staff and to approve the contract with the Edina Realty.
second?
Second by Christian Markenberg. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? And the motion carried. That brings us to upcoming meeting and event schedule. Looks like we have a CIC meeting on Thursday, December 8th at 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Prior Lake City Hall Wagon Bridge Conference Room. We also have our next Board of Managers workshop on Tuesday, December 13th from 4 p.m. at the Parkview Conference Room. And then we'd have our regular meeting at 6 p.m. Tuesday, December 13th in the Prior Lake City Hall Council Chambers. We also, in December, will have our last PLOC Cooperatives meeting, which is Thursday, December 15th, 2022 at 12 p.m. at Prior Lake City Hall Parkview Conference Room. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Matt? Second. Second by Ben? Okay, the motion has been made to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed, the motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
Did he?